everybody, it's Carissa. Today I wanted to talk about my Breaking Plaid cowl pattern and some of the unique stitches that it uses to create this design. So this alternates double knitting with double stranding. So each of the solid colored diamonds in this fabric is double knitting. So this red diamond on the tip is black on the back. It creates, double knitting creates two pieces of fabric, one on the front and one on the back, but they are actually separate layers of fabric that I can pull apart. So these solid colored diamonds are double knitted, and they're alternated with these marled or double stranded garter stitch diamonds, which are just garter stitch, so they are the same on the front and the back. And all that is garter stitch that is worked with two strands of yarn held together at the same time. So using the double knitting and double stranding, I'm able to create a reversible plaid fabric that's really squishy because it's got two layers in there, so it's very warm. Let's look at those two fabrics individually. I have a couple swatches here. This one is garter stitch that is double stranded or marled garter stitch. So that's just garter stitch, but I made it with two strands of yarn held together at the same time. So it's the same on the front and the back. This one is double knitted, so it's the opposite on the front and the back. And it's two layers of fabric. Now let's look at how those go together in the Breaking Plaid pattern. I have a swatch here that I've started that has some double stranded garter stitch over here on the right, a bit of double knitting in the middle, and back to double stranded garter stitch on the left. Let's look at each of those types of stitches on the needle. So these first four stitches are double stranded or marled garter stitch, and you can see each stitch has two strands of yarn on the needle, one gray and one blue, but they're connected with this purl bump underneath the needle. They're stuck together. So those are just four stitches that are double stranded, but it's just four stitches. Now if we look at the double knitted portion of the swatch, there are still 8 strands in these 4 stitches, but they're separated. Each pair of strands on the needle is only one stitch in double knitting. Even though they are 2 separate strands on the needle, it's only considered one stitch. So this first stitch here would be a knit with gray, or A, I'll call it, and purl with B, or blue. And then I have another knit A, purl B, knit A, purl B, knit A, purl B, and here my colors switch. Knit B, purl A, knit B, purl A. So whichever is the first stitch, the stitch that gets knitted, that is the color on the front of the fabric facing you. And the second stitch of that pair is on the back. So these first 4 double knitted stitches were knitted with gray and then purled with blue to create those 2 sides of the fabric in opposite colors. But as I said, each pair of double knitted strands only counts as one stitch. So in the charts in the pattern, it's only represented by a single box. In this case, the A color. In this case, it would be a single box that's the B color. In the written directions, you will see that abbreviated as KA PB, knit A, purl B, or knit B, purl A. So now that we've looked at the stitches on the needle, let's look at actually how to work them. So first I'm going to work a couple stitches of double-stranded knitting. So I am simply going to knit this first stitch with both strands of yarn held together. That's all that is. Knit the second stitch with both strands of yarn held together. There's nothing complicated about that. Now say I want to transition this double-stranded stitch on my left-hand needle to be a separated pair of strands for double knitting on the next row. So that is, in the pattern, that is called a split AB or a split BA. The letters at the end tell you what color, what order in which to work the colors. So if I want to do a split AB, with A being gray and B being blue in my swatch here, I'm going to, if I can get the strands of yarn separated, there we go. If I want to do a split AB here, I'm going to first knit the A strand. So I'm going to just use my right hand needle tip to sort of separate those and just grab the A strand and knit it with the A strand of yarn. And then I'll slip it off the needle, but just that A colored strand. I'll leave the B colored strand on the left hand needle. Now I'll bring both strands of yarn to the front of my work and purl the B colored strand with just the B colored yarn and slip it off the left hand needle. Bring both yarns back to the back after I'm done. So I have split that double stranded stitch below into two separated strands for double knitting. Let's look at that holding our yarn English style in the right hand. So again, if I want to split AB, then I just want to knit the A strand first and then purl the B strand. If I want to split BA, then I would do the B strand first and then the A strand. But if they're in the opposite order on my left hand needle, that's okay. I can fiddle with those because this is just double-stranded knitting here. So those two strands, when they're stuck together in a single stitch, they're gonna get twisted sometimes, and that's okay. If I want to knit blue first, then I could just reach across and grab just the blue portion of that stitch. And I'm gonna knit that with just the blue strand of yarn. Just knit that portion and bring the blue stitch off the left-hand needle, but leave the gray stitch on. Bring both strands of yarn to the front between my needle tips and purl the gray strand with just the gray yarn. Off the left needle and yarns back to the back. So I have split that double-stranded stitch below into two separate strands for double knitting, and I did them in the opposite order as what they were on the left-hand needle, which is totally fine. Now my next stitch is already separated for double knitting, so I don't have to split AB here. I'm just going to knit A and purl B, which is worked pretty much the same way that I did a split AB. It's just that the two stitches that I'm working into aren't stuck together anymore. So with a split AB, they were stuck together, and I knitted A and purled B into that double-stranded stitch. When they're separated for double knitting already, I don't have to split them. I'm just going to knit A with A, bring both yarns to the front, and purl B with B. And both yarns to the back. So I knit A, purl B, and a split AB look very similar. The only difference is whether the stitches you're working into on the left-hand needle are still stuck together or not. That's the only difference there. So if you are English style knitter, again, I'm going to knit A with A and off the left-hand needle, both yarns to the front between the needle tips, purl B with B, off the left-hand needle and back to the back of my work. Now some people work color work with one strand of yarn in each hand. It just all depends on what is most comfortable for you. So if I have A in my right hand and B in my left, I'm going to knit A with A off the left-hand needle. Both yarns still need to come to the front between the needle tips before I purl B with B. Off the left-hand needle and both yarns back to the back to be ready for my next stitch. Now say I want to switch colors. So even though my next stitch appears as A and then B, I can work them B and then A to change colors in my double knitting. So in my little swatch here, these stitches started out as gray in the front and blue in the back. And then on this row here, they switched blue in the front and gray in the back. Or in my cowl sample, that happens anytime that a solid colored diamond ends and a new solid colored diamond forms on top of it. So this stitch here was black in the front and red in the back. And then on the next row, it was red in the front and black on the back. And there's nothing weird there. I don't have to twist the stitches or anything like that. I'm going to work them in the same order that they appear on my left-hand needle. So unlike a split that we did before, where I reached over and grabbed the second strand, I do not want to do that with double knitting. I don't want to twist those stitches. I want to work them in the same order in which they appear, but I'm going to do so with the opposite color. So I'm going to knit A with B. So that's knit B, bring yarns to the front, and purl A, even though it's a B colored stitch I'm working into, and off the left-hand needle. So again, if I want to switch these, right now they are B and A. If I want to switch the colors, I'm going to knit A instead, knit with the gray, both yarns to the front, oops, and then purl B. So with double knitting stitches, you will always work the stitches in the order in which they appear on the left-hand needle, but the colors you work them with can change. Whatever the instructions say, knit A, purl B, or knit B, purl A, that is the order in which you want to use your colors. So if this is knit A, purl B in my pattern, even though B comes first on my needle, I'm still going to knit it with A. So that's knit A, both yarns to the front, purl B. And that's all. So I switched the colors. Here I had started to have some blue on the front. I just switched back to gray. Over here I had gray on the front and I switched it to blue. I didn't twist the stitches or anything. I just worked each stitch with the opposite color. Now, how do we transition from double knitting back to double stranded stitches? Well, that one's actually a lot easier. That one, it doesn't matter what color is in front, what color is in back. Doesn't matter the order in which they appear on your left-hand needle. All you're going to do is slip that first stitch as if to knit, slip the second stitch as if to knit, Put your left hand needle back through both of those stitches from left to right and knit them together. So I have now combined those two separated strands for a double knit back into a single stitch that's double stranded. So let's look at that again, English style. So I want to slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit again, left needle back through both of those stitches from left to right and knit them together. So I've now combined two stitches below here, so 4 strands. I combined the first 2 strands into a single double-stranded stitch, and then here I combined 2 more strands into a single stitch that's double-stranded. So now those 2 strands are stuck together again, no longer separated. Just going to finish out the row here with double-stranded knitting. Just knitting with both strands held together. And there we have it. So we talked about the split AB that transitions double stranding to double knitting. We talked about the slip slip knit that transitions double knitting to double stranding. And then we looked at some basic double knitting where you either knit A, purl B, or you knit B, purl A, and you work those in the exact same order that they are in the on the left needle. The letters in those abbreviations are the order in which you will use your working yarn. I hope that this video clears up any confusion that you may have had on the pattern. Thank you for watching.